I'll begin because it's almost time. Okay, and I'll see if others joins. Okay, so let's begin with the solving problem solving session third for our course Conservation Geography. And so, like always, I will just briefly go over the topics that were covered in this week, and then I have questions from all of these modules which encompass previous assignments as well as a new question that can come up in this STEM's question assignments or even questions for exams. Right. So the modules that was covered in this week was lithosphere and landform, where we first look into the rock and minerals. That was part of the first lecture, where we tried to understand what are rocks and what are minerals and how do you characterize them. The second lecture was about geomorphology and process. So you have rocks and minerals and then you have landforms. So what connects these two are these different processes by which they are generated. So in this lecture we were more focused on the processes and the methods or the developments of the landforms. And then finally in the third lecture we had looked into the evolution of landforms, so different type of landforms and what exactly causes them to be existing. So let's begin with the first module. But before that, just to give an overview, what exactly is lithosphere? If you remember from the lecture, how did you connect and how did you come to lithosphere? So basically, there are four regions that we talk about when we talk about environment: biosphere, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. So what is biosphere? So let's first talk about the other two, three. So atmosphere is basically the air that we breathe. So the layer of the environment that concerns with the air is in atmosphere. Hydrosphere, as the name suggests, is water. So hydrosphere. Lithosphere is the rocky sphere or the sphere of which is made of rocks. So the land. So land, water, air, and biosphere is basically the conjunctions of these three where biotic organisms survive. It could be plant, it could be animal, where they sustain life. So these are how all these spheres of earth are connected, and we are focusing on just the land for the timing, which is the lithosphere. So moving ahead, the first lecture is rocks and minerals. And what do we so before, like always, I go with the questions first. This time I thought I'll go with the theory first and then I will focus on the questions. So as the lecture name suggests, it's about rocks and minerals. So what do you define rock as? A rock is basically an aggregate of one or more minerals and it does not have a specific composition. So basically, just a second. Right. So if you see a rock is actually, if you go out in your outside your home, you will see a lot of rocks. Rocks are very easy to find. So they are basically aggregates. They can be of one mineral. They can have multiple minerals. The important feature of rocks is that do not have specific composition. They can be of any mineral and they can be of varying sizes. For example, in this slide itself you see that there are two sizes of rock. One is very big, one is small. They can be very small, they can be pebble like as well. So they can have different minerals and their composition is not specific. One rock can have very different composition from a similar looking different rock. So they don't have very specified chemical composition. And why am I focusing on specified chemical composition? Because minerals, the component that builds up the rock, is on the contrary very specific. So mineral is actually a naturally occurring inorganic solid. So it's inorganic, it doesn't have any organic compound, it's all made up of chemicals. And solids, it's not it's solid, it's not any in the form of any water or a gaseous component, it's a solid. And this has chemical composition which is very definite. So if it is a, for example, here in the image you see it's CaSO4, so calcium sulfate. If it is calcium sulfate, it will be gypsum in its hydrated form. And it is, whenever you, that means whenever you say gypsum, you always know what is the chemical constituent of that mineral. And not only has a chemical composition which is definite, it also has a very structured atomic arrangement. So you need to remember two things when you're talking about mineral and rock. Rock doesn't have a defined composition. Rock can be of many minerals, but minerals on the other hand first has to have a very definite chemical composition, so its chemical composition is fixed. And the second is its atomic arrangement, which is how are its atoms arranged. in its surface is also very ordered. So it's the repetitive pattern. That is one set, that is the basic unit, and that repeats over the space. So that's important because that gives rise to two properties that you would have, if you would have seen in lectures and try to remember it, you know that I am talking about something called cleavage and fracture, which is related to ordered atomic arrangement. So you need to be very careful when you are looking into minerals. So what are the characteristics of minerals? They have a crystal form. So as you can see on the image, cleavage and fracture. So cleavage is when you are trying to cut the mineral in its ordered atomic arrangement layer. So let's say they are arranged in this how do I show it? Just a second, give me here. So let's say here they are arranged in a horizontal manner, and you're trying to cut the mineral rock from that plane. Then that is cleavage, because they will have a clean cut and that will be a smoother surface. But when you try to cut it, let's say vertically, because the atoms are no longer arranged in order, they will give some rough edges. That's fracture. So cleavage is what is clean cutting. Fracture is the opposite of it, when you're not cutting in the proper arrangement plane. Next, you have about the appearances. So appearance not only in form of what color it is, but how lustrous it is. So what kind of shine it has, and transparent or streaky. And then you have two other features, which are hardness and specific gravity, which talks about features like how easy is it for you to make it a powder, what is its gravity, how much mass it has in a given volume. So all these are characteristic property of a mineral, and with which you can identify what kind of mineral it is, and which mineral is then present in the rock. So if for defining rock, that this rock has these minerals, you use these features to identify the mineral and then classify the rock. Right. So that was the basic about rocks and minerals. And then if we talk about rocks now, because rocks don't have definite composition, but they have definite classes based on how they are formed. So there are three families of rock that, if you can remember from the lecture, they were igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Igneous are basically rocks that are formed from the magma. Magma we have studied in the previous lecture as well. It is the material that is coming out from the volcano. So what comes out from the volcano is called a magma. When it comes out and reaches the surface, it is called a lava. So you have magma or lava that comes out to the surface and then it solidifies. Why does it solidify? Because when it is coming out, you remember it had greater temperature, pressure. So it had very high temperature, and when it reaches to the surface, the temperature goes down and it starts to cool down. So as it cools down, it starts to solidify. The liquid starts to solidify. Now that's when it starts to form rock, because it will start forming these solid aggregates. Now based on how it is forming the aggregate, there are again further two types of igneous rocks. They can be intrusive or they can be extrusive. Intrusive, as the name suggests, it's very slow. So it's slow magma cooling. So it's cooling, but it's cooling at a very slower rate. Now because it is slowing, you can imagine it is cooling at a very slow rate, it is able to form these different aggregates because it is cooling slowly. So the rock, the feature of the rock that will help you identify it as an intrusive rock is coarse grain. So if you look at, for example, in this image here, if you look at the granite, you see the surface is not smooth, it's not plain, it has these grainy like structure. That is coarse grain structure, and it is because it is slowly cooling. But on the contrary, let's say it has come out to the surface and all of a sudden it cools or rapidly cools down. So then because it has no time to form the aggregate, it forms a smooth grain. It suddenly cools down and whatever it has formed as an aggregate stays there. So that's smooth grain. So this you need to remember, that igneous rock itself has two types, intrusive and extrusive, and you need to remember which one is coarse grain and which one is smooth grain. Example for this is obsidian. So there were other examples in the lectures also, but what I want you to remember is intrusive and extrusive. Next, you have the sedimentary rocks. So now you have igneous rocks that have come out onto the surface and cooled down and formed these aggregates. Now you have sediments. These rocks are then because of, remember, if you had looked into the lecture, there were things like weathering, erosion. So all these geomorphic processes have led to the igneous rock, breaking up and forming sediments. Now these sediments later again start accumulating with each other, compacting each other, and this leads to the formation of sedimentary rocks. So easy to understand, you can remember it just by the name. You have igneous, then you have sedimentary. And these again, as the name suggests, they are forming from sediment compaction and they are very layered. So one other thing that I did not mention was igneous doesn't have any layers. Igneous layers mean basically deposition of one layer over the others. So one, like one set of rocks have aggregated together, and then after a few time, few other layers have aggregated over it. So you have layered. Igneous doesn't have that time because it's even if it is slow cooling, it's still the same lava or magma that is cooling down. But in sedimentary, because there are sediments that are compacting on each other, you have several layers that form on each other. That's why they are layered. So the other difference between sedimentary and igneous is they are layered by the way they are formed. And they can be clastic, chemical, organic based on how they are formed. So if they are formed only by rocks, that's clastic. If they have chemical composition, for example, they are formed because of minerals that are dissolved, that's limestone. And if you have organic matter, then it is coal. Organic matter is anything that is like that is degraded, organic material that is degraded over time. It leads to organic sedimentary rocks. That's, you need to remember by the name how that sediment would have aggregated and what are the material that form these sediments. And lastly, you have metamorphic. Metamorphic is basically one rock changing to other rock. So if the metamorphosis is basically changing a formation or your look, and in rocks you are talking about the transformation of one rock to the other rock type, and they can be layered, they cannot be layered, depends on how this metamorphosis is taking place. That gives them the two example or two classes, foliated and non-foliated, right? And the last thing that sums up this entire lecture was the steps of the rock cycle. That is, how are these all rocks connected with each other? So you start with magma. This is what I have been talking about. You have this magma, uh, then you have magma coming out, cools down, becomes igneous rocks. Igneous rocks, because of various geomorphic processes, breaks down into several sediments, smaller particles, which are sands and gravel. And then these compact together, come form different layers. That's called the sedimentary rock. And then again, because of pressure, because of heat, because of external forces, these rocks break down and form metamorphic rock, which further on melting forms again the constituents that make up the lava, and then again they come up as lava into the surface, or probably from the magma that comes out as lava into the surface, and then again this cycle forms. So rock also has a cycle from its birth to again coming back to the source of magma, right? So this is what the entire first lecture was comprising of, like the different rocks and the different types of rocks that were there and how are they connected to each other. So now, but what I have done is I have taken the principles of the lectures and I have put it in the slides for discussion. But now I have several questions that encompass all these different methods and different types of rocks that were discussed. So even if you cannot remember clearly, but just by reading the question, you should be able to understand what you are supposed to focus on in the lectures. So yeah, so there are 10 such questions here. So 5 are on these slides, 5 are on the next slides. And what I will do is, because this is a more of, as you know, this is problem solving session, so you would like to have some recollection of what you had gone to the lecture. So I will maybe wait for 2-3 minutes for you to recollect what do exactly these words mean, and then when I go back to the answers, I can try to give you a sort of reasoning to it. So you can try to answer this question. Again, as I will just try to remind, these are questions from previous assignments, previous exams, new questions that can come up in these times assignments or exams. I'll wait for 2-3 minutes for you to answer. I'll wait for 2 more minutes for others if they want to try, um, and then I can discuss the answers. Okay, so let's go back to the answers now. So, yeah, these are the answers. So let me try to read the question, and if you have any doubt, let me know. The first question was sheet silicate minerals with pearly vitreous luster. So you have the composition of your mineral, and you have properties of these minerals. So you need to try to remember what kind of. So in this, especially in the naming ones, for example, you have names of the rocks and minerals. The only way you can remember is try to remember the features of the rocks or the minerals. There is no way to understand that, because mica, you have to remember what's pyroxene, quartz, amphiboles, what are they made up of, and what are their properties. So the answer to this one with richest luster is mica. Second one, which of these are correctly arranged as per Mohs scale of softness to hardness? Hardest basically tells that your uh, the, the mineral that you are looking into, how easy it is for you to make it a powder. And you remember, if you remember from the lectures, it was more about comparison. So you take something that you know the known hardness, and then you check your unknown mineral and check if it's easier for you to break or not. That determines if it's a softer one or it's a hard one. And based on that, let's these are the four there are four combination in these options. You have to pick the one from softest to the hardest, so one which is easiest to make a powder, then to the one which is not. And the answer is diamond at the end, because the diamond at the end should be the thing that makes you click it, that diamond is the softest, is the hardest material that you know. So diamond is at the end, and talc is, if you remember, talcum, talc, that's the softest. So talc, and then calcite and feldspar. Next is, how does a mineral grow into crystals? So when you define your minerals properties, the ordered atomic arrangement leads it to grow, leads it to form the crystals, and then this is what enables you to cleave it with the smoother finish. Next was, which of these is not a characteristic of mineral? This what we had discussed in the points that I had discussed for minerals. Weight was not a feature. We had discussed about cleavage patterns, hardness of the mineral, and color, but not about weight. Next is granite. Is an example of felsic igneous rock. So igneous rock, yes, but what kind of igneous rock? Felsic. So if you remember from felsic, it has words from like for example mafic, right? It has magnesium and iron. Similarly, felsic had your iron composing igneous rocks. Right. So these are the 5 questions. The next set of 5 questions are these. Okay, try to think on similar line. What could these answers be? And I will see you in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so I will discuss the answers and you can check if you were thinking in the right directions. Right. So the first one is green or black colored inosilicate minerals forming prism or needle-like crystals. And the answer for that is amphibose, which is a type of mineral that was described in the lectures specifically. Next, if you talk about waxy as a characteristic for a mineral, which characteristic are you actually talking about? Like we remember, right? We were talking about color, structure, streak. All these are different characteristics of minerals. And when you say this mineral is waxy in nature, which of these property are actually talking about? You're talking about the luster property, how lustrous it is. Luster is basically shiny. So if you're waxy, you're shiny. So that's the thing that we are talking about. Next, which of these is correct? This was a few first slides that we had discussed about sedimentary, about igneous rocks and the type of igneous rock. We had intrusive and extrusive. When does it form intrusive and when does it form extrusive, and what is the property of it? So when it is intrusive, we had said that there was a slower cooling. A slower cooling when it happened only when it's in the surface of the crust, not outside crust. Extrusive is sudden cooling, rapid cooling that can happen when the magma comes to the surface of the crust, and it is sudden cooling. And when it's suddenly cooling, it is fine grained, as opposite to intrusive or slower cooling, which has coarse grain. This is what we discussed in the first slides. So that is what the question was all about. For people who have joined late, uh, this is what I was talking when I was talking of different type of rocks. You had igneous rocks, sedimentary, and metamorphic. Among igneous rocks, The two categories, intrusive and extrusive, have very characteristic property that you should remember, and these are the two that mainly concerned with them. Next was, what kind of cleavage pattern does halite have? So you need to remember halite with what type of rock, and it's composed of, if you remember, it's salts, and the arrangement of the atoms are cubic in nature. That's why the cleavage pattern is cubic. So if you have any other planes, for example basal, octahedron, perpendicular, if you, so basically cubics are arrangement in this form. So this is one cube, then you have one cube, one. So if you cleave the mineral like this in the horizontal pattern, you will get a smoother finished end. But if you cut the mineral using a perpendicular axis, it will give rise to something called fracture with uneven ends. So the difference between cleavage and fracture. Last is sandstone is an example of which of the kind of these rocks. So you have siliclastic rock or sedimentary rocks. In that, siliclastic is basically one which consists of siliceous particles. So sandstone is the primary example of those classes of rocks. Right. Another quick revision of these types of classification is in the next slides. So all the different kind of rock that has been discussed in the lecture, I have covered all the classes here, and they had many examples. I have picked one of the examples from here. Now I will want you to attempt and try to guess which example belongs to what. But if you can't, that don't get overwhelmed. What you can remember is that you need to remember these classes of rocks that you need to study it in the form, and this will also help you to understand the or provide a guide through the lecture. So I will not wait for long here, but I will still wait for 1 minute so that you can at least remember what these rocks were, and if you can have a guess on the examples. So we have non-foliated, foliated rocks. These are from the metamorphic rocks which have layers and no layers. Then you have siliceous rocks which are silica consisting, organic rich rocks which are composed of organic material, evaporite rocks which are formed from evaporative materials or evaporative components, carbonate, siliclastic, the name suggests what are they consisting of. So most of the time rocks will have name which are indicative of the minerals or the constitutive minerals. Among the given options here, the ones for the organic rich rock should be very, very easy for you. Can you try and guess that first? Organic rock is basically rock that have formed because of decomposition of organic material. Which one do you think was discussed in regard to this in the lecture series? Okay, it was coal, and let me give you the answers for that. So your coal is organic rich rock, as I have mentioned. Let's make you work through the others as well. So non-foliated rocks are the quartzite, foliated are gneiss, siliceous are chert, and we had also read one more siliceous in the previous slide. Right. Uh, then you have siliclastic, that is sandstone. Evaporite is halites. We had done this also in the previous slide. And carbonate is limestone, which is also very common rock that where we keep coming across. So some of these are common names that is easier to guess. Some of them are quite very descriptive and very particular, but I just wanted an exercise where you can try and relate this. Similarly, these are the first few set of rocks that we had studied. The next set was this. Try to solve this as well, or at least try to remember if you can recollect listening to them in the lecture series. So here we have the rocks that are formed chemically, rocks that are formed organically. Clastic rocks ultramafic rocks, so iron and magnesium consisting. And then we have rocks which have pyroxenes and olivines predominance, and quartz and feldspar predominance.
मैं इसमें से सोच
Okay, so I will just give you the answers so that you can see. So chemically formed ones were potash, organically formed were chalk, clastic conglomerate, ultramorphic were peridotites, the ones with pyroxenes and olivine riches are gabbro, and quartz and feldspar were rhyolite. So what I have done here is I have summarized, or I have put all the types of rock that were discussed in the lectures in these two slides. So whenever you are revising or you want to understand, you can come back to this PPT and just look at these different types of rocks, and then go back to your lecture series and try to just divide your lecture into these different parts and try to then understand what are the different properties, because as a whole it might get a little confusing. Now that we have spoken about rocks, there was also extensive discussion on minerals. um, I have tried to put not every group that was discussed, but some of them into the slide. And this again, other in, as compared to rock, as we have discussed, minerals are very specific. Their composition is very specific. So can you try to check if you remember which one belongs to which category, because they are very specific, and you can try to remember from the lecture series what was discussed for all of these different mineral groups. You have quartz, feldspar, pyroxene, olivine, amphiboles, and mica. Last two were discussed in the question series as well. Okay, so let's see if you were thinking in the correct direction. So mica, as we had seen, sheet silicate minerals, and amphiboles are the ones that were forming prisms. These two were covered in the log lectures questions also. Next, we have quartz, which are white or colorless hard material, which is virtually insoluble in water. Feldspar basically are tectosilicate minerals arranged as 3D lattice. Pyroxenes are inosilicates, which are forming the 10% of Earth's crust. So this is what you should remember, because this is very characteristic. And then you have olivines, which are magnesium iron silicates found majorly in the upper mantle. So that's why crust and mantle is what you should remember. So pyroxene and olivines. Okay, right. So these are minerals. These minerals form a rock, and then you have different kinds of rock that we have already gone over. Now, with that, let's move to the second lecture that was discussed this week, which is geomorphology and process. So, like I said, you have rocks, you have minerals, and then you have landforms. Landforms are hills, plateaus, like different types of landform that you see in the nature. The thing that connects these two are the processes or the geomorphological aspects, and we will now look into that. So, these are the different geomorphology of present in the earth. Geomorphology is basically the study of earth's forms or landforms. What are these different landforms? They are volcano, hills, island, canyon, jungle, river, ocean, desert, mountain, name anything that you see around yourself that has to be a landform. They are affected by endogenic processes and exogenous processes, and that together bring up these landforms. Now, these processes, as I've already mentioned, they are endogenic, which are from within the crust, and exogenous, which is from outside because of outside forces. The these processes can be further divided into, I'm not going to detail of all, but what I've done is I've summarized the entire lectures into slides so that it gives you headers to how to read it. So endogenic processes are again of two types: diastrophism and volcanic eruptions. Volcanic eruptions we have discussed at length in the last lecture. Diastrophism are methods again or processes that again have different types. For example, orogenic, as you can see here on the bottom. Orogenic is basically mountain rising. So you remember all the collisions and the contacts that leads to uprising of the land. That's orogenic process that leads to this uprising and formation of mountains and hills. Epiorogenic is the one which is surrounding the formation of mountains. Earthquakes and plate tectonics, again, we had discussed in the last class section. So, endogenic processes are processes which are happening within the Earth's layers, so crust and mantle. But when you talk about exogenic process, you have other uh, agents that are causing these processes. For example, weathering, mass movement, which we'll see in the next slide, erosion, and transportation and deposition. So as I mentioned, we will now see exogenic process. First is weathering. Weathering, as a name suggests, anything to break away or anything to weather away. So they also can be of three types depending on what is causing them. Is it a physical weathering? It is by some kind of pressure or some kind of physical force. Is it because of chemical or is it because of biological? Is there a biological component to it or is there any chemical component? When you talk about physical, we have thermal stress. So because of temperature, increased temperature, you have breakage of some rocks or breakage of some landforms. Cryofracturing, which is here in the image here. So what you see here is, look at this image in the bottom. You have this one rock and you have, remember, you have several cracks into the rock because these rocks are basically aggregates, so they can have cracks among them. Now in that crack, if you have water into the crack and the water freezes, so when the water freezes, what happens is volume is increasing. So when it's increasing volume, it is exerting pressure onto the surface of the rock, and when it freezes and it expands, the pressure can lead to the breakage of the rock, and we are ultimately talking about breaking of these rocks into smaller particles or smaller components. And because of this increased pressure, you have these rocks which are now breaking into pieces. But the pressure is not just once it is expanding. This process of expanding and cooling and expanding and then again going down has to be in a repeated cycle, because that will what lead to the increased pressure on the walls of the rocks. So that's cryofracturing. Next, you have mechanical acting of ocean waves. So waves, you would have remember, if you can remember, cliff formation is because of waves. So waves come and strike the surface of the landform, and then they lead off to some of these stones and rocks breaking away. So that's also a form of weathering. And then you have pressure release due to erosion. So erosion is basically taking away the top layer of the soil, right? So when the top layer of the soil is there, the bottom layer soil is actually uh, protected from all the other kind of stresses that it can get affected with. But when you have erosion, you have this next layer which is right beneath the layer that has got eroded. It is coming into direct contact with pressures now. So it can have thermal pressure, it can have different kind of stresses, and that can lead to breakaway of the soil. So that's your pressure because of erosion. Now, next set is chemical. You can have hydrolysis, carbonation, hydration. For example, here in the image, you have carbonation. So you have this chemical reaction which leads to the breaking of the rocks. And then you have biological, which is basically both these process along with organic material. So that's one of the exogenic process. Next exogenous process is mass movement. So you have this bulk movements taking place. These can be slow, so slower movement. This can be a very rapid movement, suddenly all of them flowing out. Or you can have landslide, which is very common thing that you would have seen. Now in slow, we discussed about creep and solifluction. So basically how your particles are moving. In rapid, you have mud flow, avalanche. Avalanche is the image that you see in this middle image. You have these ice pack or snow which is falling all together with very high pressure, and that, of course, you can imagine it's falling with very high speed, very high pressure, so it will lead to weathering of whatever it comes into contact with. And then you have earth flow, and lastly you have landslide, which you would have seen if you have uh, like you read about in newspapers or seen in images where you have these landslides, and with landslides you have huge amount of weathering from different rocks and different surfaces. So that can be again in the form of slump, debris slide, debris fall, or rock fall. Right. So this is about the second exogenic process, mass movement. Right. So in this second lecture, most of the lecture encompassed only the processes that led to these different formation. And again, in this also I have tried to put all the questions which summarize the entire lecture, so you can try and attempt these different questions, because I've tried to cover all these different processes that were discussed. So you can try to remember from the lecture if you can connect the words and see if you get the right answer. Because these are questions, I will wait for maybe 2 to 3 minutes and come back and discuss the answers. But these are not difficult, so you can do it. Okay, I've received one set of response. I will wait for others. Meanwhile, I'll just check. Okay, so yeah, so I will, it's over 3 minutes, so let's discuss the answer. I've got some answers. Let's just look into the answers now. Right. So dash is the mechanical disintegration and chemical decomposition of rocks in situ. It's basically it's talking about your process where your rocks are broken away, but in its place. So folds and faults, they are anyway processes which are not leading to disruption. They are endogenic process, right? Erosion is taking it away from one place to other. Weathering is breaking it away in the same place. So weathering is defined as a mechanical disintegration and chemical decomposition, right? Next was cryofracturing and salt. This is what I had discussed a moment back. So this is physical weathering. Next is which of this is an endogenic process, which is folding, which is I just mentioned, because other three with weathering, fast movement, and erosion we have just discussed. Fourth is which force contributes to making a flat land. So if you remember, or if you imagine also, you have endogenic process and you have exogenic process. Just a second. Yeah, you have endogenic process and you have exogenic process. Now endogenic process are basically forces from within the earth's crust that is coming up as the lands and hills. So they are trying to make earth discontinuous in its landform. But when you have erosion or when you have these exogenous processes that are taking, so erosion is basically taking up a strip of layer or top layer, or you have your weathering which breaks away part of the rocks. So it's basically trying to make earth a flat land. So you just remember by endogenic exogenic process also, which one makes a flat land? It's the exogenic process, and that's why the answer is erosion here. Next one is which one is of this is not a chemical weathering? Expansion, because the other three, hydration, oxygen, carbonation, as the name suggests, these are chemical reactions, and that's part of chemical weathering. Expansion is on the hand a physical phenomena. Good. Next, what we have next is next set of questions. Again, try to attempt this, and these are also not difficult, so it should be easier for you. Okay. I saw many responses, and yeah, I also see 9 8. Just a second. Yeah. Okay. So I think I have my responses, and I also have 10B. 10B. Okay. So let's look into the answers, and I'll discuss them as well. Right. So the first one is thermal stress leads to which of these? Chemical weathering, physical weathering, biological weathering, or none of these? And thermal stress, as you remember, was one of the examples that I had discussed. It was about physical weathering. because chemical have only chemical processes. You need to have chemical process, for example, hydration, hydrolysis, carbonation. Just a second. I am sorry, just give me 1 minute. Right. Uh, yeah, coming back to this. So, thermal stress is a physical weathering. Next is mass movement of rocks or debris down the slope takes place, because of which reason it is very logical that the movement, if you have anything that moves on its own, it moves because of the effect of gravity. Next is wind as an example of exogenic forces, which are all the agents of weathering. Next is which of these is a slow mass movement process. This is solifluction. Remember the classification that I did. In that, solifluction and creep were the slow mass movement process. Avalanche, mud flow, earth flow were rapid mass movement process. So basically talks of, so when I say slow here means it takes place over a longer period of time. And solifluction is basically, if you remember the image that I had shown, it's basically the mass movement or the weathering of the soil, but it takes place over a long period of time. And last, as I think most of you get it right, mechanical action of ocean is physical weathering, which is again from the example that I had discussed, right? So that brings an end to this part of the lecture series. And now we move on to the third one. The third one is on evolution of landforms. So like I had mentioned in the beginning, that evolution of landform is basically, so you know that this is the processes that can give rise to landform, and you know the different type of landform. Now we are going to connect and see how does actually this process leads to the formation of these kind of landforms. But before that, there was one feature that was discussed in the lecture, which was about reliefs. So relief is basically difference between two elevation point on the surface of Earth. As you can see on this image here, this is from the lecture only. So let's say this is a surface on the planet Earth, and you have 2 points here. One is here on the left and one is here on the right. Now, if the distance between the 2 points are not high, they are called low relief. And if the distance is very, very higher, for example, one point is at this height and the other is at this height, so the difference between the two elevation will be very high. That's called a high relief. So low relief, high relief. Why it is important? Because if you have a low relief, then any agent, the speed of that agent will be very less because it's in the same line. But if you have something like this or anything which has higher elevation and lower elevation in point, then the speed will be more. And why is are we even talking about speed? Because we are talking about changes in the landform, and changes in the landforms are brought about by the speed of the geomorphological agent. So if the geomorphological agent is taking place or is coming at a very high speed, the impact of those agents will be very high, and the changes or the shearing or the weathering or whatever process you are looking into will the impact will be very high, and that it can lead to the changes in the features at a very quick pace. So that's why you need to see what was the relief points of those processes. Right. So the next topic that was discussed is of course the landform. That is the whole purpose of these lectures. So what we see here is that any geomorphological process, they are perceived to the result of their action on landforms, and the landform is a natural or artificial feature. Artificial in the sense that are built upon. So you will see, so anything that was existing, but you have landform which are not however existed, but it was formed like this because of several features that called artificial. But you have natural, which were already existing in the way they are, right? It was just brought about by the geomorphic agent. So what are the different landforms we had already discussed in the previous section? We have hills, we have plateaus, we have valleys. Hi, I am sorry if there was a pause there. Um, yeah. So continuing. So the different type of landforms that are discussed in the lecture series are hills, plateaus, valleys, beaches, spits. If you remember these words, these are the lines that we will be discussing in a moment. And these are the geomorphic agents. Can you quickly recognize what are these? Let me try to hover around them and see if you can remember. So this, as the image suggests, this is very windy in nature. So this is wind. These two here are, I'm sure you would have seen, at least you would have seen the images for sure. This is an ocean. This is, hello?
Glaciers.
Yes, glaciers. Correct. Excellent. So this is ocean. This is glacier. What are these two? These are two forms of water that you have discussed. What are the two forms of water that were discussed in the lecture series? You can also type it in case you I have internet issues. What is this? Hint. This one. Yeah.
Ma'am, this may be ocean water.
Which one?
Maybe.
The one at the top or the one at the bottom?
Bottom one.
Okay, and the top one, any idea? But which one is this?
Mountainous water.
Okay.
Waterfall
Okay,
type.
sure. So someone said this is, I think Pragya said, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
So
ma'am.
Pragya says this is mountainous water, this is oceanic water, this is glacier, and this is wind already discussed. Anyone else has any other suggestions for anything, any of these agents? They were mainly these are the 5 agents that were discussed in the lecture. Wind is easy to guess. What are the other 4? Anyone else? Okay, I'll tell you a name. Can you tell me which one is that? Which one of these is groundwater? This, this, this. Out of these 3 images, which one is for groundwater? Anyone? So what I've done here is I've tried to put images because in the lecture you have all these different terms that are continuously being used, and what I've tried to do is put up images so that you can also imagine the landform that are being discussed here. So okay, let me tell you. The first one is running water. So any form of water which is in motion, river, except for ocean, because oceans have waves which are encountering the edges. But in running water, you don't have waves. You have this flow of water that is from one height to the other or in the same level, high relief and low relief. So running water. Second is groundwater. Groundwater which is flowing underneath the ground, beneath the ground, which also causes equal amount of erosion or weathering for that matter. Wind, as we all know. Ocean, we have ocean with respect to waves, what kind of waves it generates and how does those wave impact the landform. And lastly, glaciers. These are ice sheets, pack of ice sheets which are moving. So you can imagine these are mass movement that are taking place and that will also affect the landform. Right. So quickly, we will do all these landforms. But before the types of landform that these agents generate, there are 2 types of landform itself. One is depositional and one is erosional. These 2 are important because you need to remember the basic difference between them. Depositional, as the name suggests, it is depositing something. So you have a landform and you see accumulation of something, that is deposition. You have the deposition of sand, sediment, rocks, pebbles, whatever you want to see it as, but it is to be accumulation. It is accumulated by the agent, so it is depositing a landform. Depositing. The other is erosion, is taking it away. So any hole, any cave, any sudden gap, those are erosion and those are called erosion landform. But the agents are the ones, geomorphic agents are the ones that are responsible for those landforms. So that's why they come under erosion landforms. The two examples on these images, can you identify them? What is this depositional landform? If people are from coastal region, they should be able to guess it quickly. Anyone? What is this depositional landform? No? Okay, and what is the erosional landform here? This is seen in wherever you see the other landform, you also have this landform. Wherever you see oceans, you have both of these landform that is visible. And if you are, if you have seen tourist images, these two generally come up as attraction points. If not, I will come back to this. Anyone?
Ma'am, it's a
And
beach.
the other one?
Cave.
Exactly. So beach and a cave. Beach is depositional because it has all the sands and sediments. Erosional is cave because, as you will see in the lecture, it says that the groundwater has taken away most of the parts of the sediment. So it is now left with a hollow mass, land mass. That's cave. That's erosion. Okay. No, now I will quickly, because of course if I discuss all of them it will take a lot of time. So I have picked all the geomorphic agent and one example of erosional landform and one example of depositional landform with images so that you can imagine what kind of landform it is creating. And these are, I have taken one example. In the lectures there were many other landforms discussed, so you can now go back and try to see if you can imagine, or you can at least with images you can try to see. So like I said, running water. So running water, if it leads to erosion, it can form these valleys here in between the gaps that you see, these wide gaps between two hills. And if it is supposed to deposit something or depositional landform, it's alluvial. So you have this running water and you have this sediment which are depositing right near the edges. These are alluvial soil, alluvial soil. So these are very fertile soil because it's have river sediments coming on and they become this plain later. So these are alluvial fans which are deposited by the running water. The next agent is groundwater, and groundwater is just what we have discussed. If it is erosional form, it's a sinkhole. As you can just look at the image and you can see what's going on. There was groundwater here which was colliding with the surface and it led to erosion, taking away most of the part of the landmass, and now it is left with just this big hole. So that's sinkhole. These are all images from natural habitat, so you can see it happening. And depositional is stalagmite. So inside those caves, you have groundwater running, and then you have these depositions over a period of time. There are three forms, you remember: stalagmite, stalactite, and pillars. Stalagmite is the ones that are growing from the bottom. Stalactites, which are from the top. So here, the ones which are at the lower ones are either at the bottom are called stalagmite. One from the top of the terrace of the cave is called stalactite. And if you have a connection between these two, it's called a pillar. So all these are depositions of sediments over a period of time after forming a cave. So that's deposition landform, but by groundwater. Next, wind. As you can see, the first one is erosion. So there was some high tabletop plateau kind of landform because of erosion, because of weathering. So wind was affecting the plateau again and again and taking away chunks of it, so breaking it away. So you have paddy plains here and pediments also. So this is pediment and paddy plains. So these are erosion because these are parts that are taken away from the plateau. But at the same time, if you go to sand or if you go to desert, you will have these dunes, a portion of sand hills. These are called sand dunes. So those are depositions. So the sand particles are deposited on top of each other over a period of time, and that's called sand dunes. So that's a form of depositional landform. And the next one is waves and current, which are ocean waves, which is very easy to understand. If you have these waves that come and contact the cliff again and again, part of cliff will start weathering away. or part of that rock will start weathering away and will give rise to cliff. And that's why if you go to any cliff, the shape of the cliff is always irregular because it is being broken away at different like different times by different wave by different intensity. And at the same time, if the waves are depositing such sediments or plains, these are called spits, right? And the last one was glaciers. Cirques and drumlins, the concept remains the same. Cirque is forming a hole, suddenly ice sheet goes all disappearing. It takes away part of the landmass. Drumlin is on the opposite, the same ice sheet and going and depositing landmass onto the floor. So that's drumlin and cirque. Right. Okay. So I've again covered all the theoretical aspects that were covered in the lecture. The last few slides here are on the different kind of questions that I could come up uh, from the lecture series, and this would be a good revision for you to go over the lecture once again. So like again, this is a question set, so I will wait and you can try attempting. Yes, there are a lot of names, there are a lot of things that you have to remember, but it's okay if you can't do it now, but then this is how you can take a guide and learn it next time. So you can see how the different platform that have been discussed. I will wait for 2-3 minutes. Should be able to get at least few of them. They are very easy. One, eight, five, five, eight, okay, so 3 minutes by my clock. Right. So valleys are, so I think someone wrote depositional, but you can remember the answer by looking at the forms. So valleys are actually having gaps. So deposition will have something which you know looks like it's being filled up or it's covered up. Erosional landform will have this characteristic property where there are breakage, sudden breakage, irregular patterns, or a gap. So valleys are gaps between two hills, and that makes it erosional landform. And running water was the, this was the example that we had discussed at the first. Second is which one of these is not a landform formed by glaciers? Pediment, because we have just discussed pediments are formed by wind, if you remember, in the deserts. Third is stratified and assorted deposit comprised of fine matter with rounded edges. This I have taken as it is from the discussion when he was defining the outwash deposit. So This was just to see if you remember it from the words. Next is which of these in a depositional landform? Sinkholes, sarks, and sea stacks. Sea stacks are again stacks which are, like parts of which have been eroded by the ocean waves. So sea stacks, sarks, sinkholes are erosional landform. Oxbow Lake, again a lake. Oxbow Lake is a deposition around the lake in the form of oxbow, so it's depositional landform. The last one was sand dunes. This we have just discussed. It was should have been easy. And the last five set, which is again not very difficult. Delta or the plains, these are all depositional landforms. Delta, river, Gangetic plains, all these are depositional landforms by rivers or oceans or sea waves. Okay, I have had some responses, so let's do it quickly. Just a second. Yes. The first one is okay. Maybe I'll give the answers first and this. Right. So the first one is the Nile Delta, which is an example of a deposition landform, as I had said, but it is by running water. Okay, because again, any delta that you see is mostly around river, and river is a form of running water. Next is which of this is not a depositional landform which is caused by waves and currents. So beaches, spits, and offshore sandbars again by waves. Eskers are actually by the glaciers. Which of this is a type of moraine found by or found on the sides of glaciers? So now moraine is a erosional landform by glaciers, and these are the different types of moraine. There are only few landform for which subtypes were also discussed. One was moraine and one was sand dunes. So that's why I picked both of them so that I can highlight that this was also discussed. So among these sites was lateral moraine. We have terminal ground and medial moraine as well. You could once again look into this. Next was which of this is a type of erosional landform? So drumlins, stalactites, beaches. Beaches is a depositional for sure. Stalactites are also depositional. We had spoken about this when we were discussing about groundwater. Drumlins also we had discussed in glaciers. This was also deposited. Waterfall is on the contrary an erosional landform because it is in the form, if you remember it, running water and waterfall, they were erosional in landform. Last is which is not, this is not a type of sand dunes. So if you look into again the type of sand dunes that we discussed, there were no circular sand dune that is present. Right. And with this, we come to the end of today's presentation. This is the last part for today's presentation. Here, what I've tried to do is I've given you the different landforms and different, description for the landform. This is an interesting activity. You can try to relate and see if you can guess it correct. This is not about depositional or erosional or the agent. This is more about what do you see it as a morphological form. So you can try and uh, attempt this. This is interesting, and let's try to do this first, and then I'll describe it. So you have glacial till, offshore sandbars, pediments, meanders, sinkholes. All of these are terms that we'll repeatedly use in geography or if you want to describe any landform. So, what do you think these look like or the features of these landforms are? Okay, so yeah, these are the answers. Let's see if you were able to get it. So the first one is inclined rocky floors close to the mountains, with or without a thin cover of debris. So uh, if you remember in our discussion right now, I had shown you pediments which are erosional landformed by winds, and there was this. I told you right, a plateau in the sand or a hill in the sand, and this says that these are those floors. So basically, the pediplanes and pediments, these are the ones that are at the bottom, and the close to mountains. So close to mountain should have given you a hint that from these topics or from this option, pediments beyond the first one. Second one is a winding curve or bend in the river forming a U shape. This is very important and this is very characteristic meanders, and you should remember this because meanders are again very important landforms. Next, funnel shaped opening that are created either because of solution action or because of collapse of underground caves by underground water. Even if you don't could not understand whole of it, just 2 3 keywords, for example, groundwater, collapse, and solution or openings. So openings, collapse, groundwater, I had just discussed this when I was discussing about the groundwater as a geomorphic agent, that the erosion landform it had was a sinkhole. Suddenly everything gone collapsing, and there was a hole that was sinkhole, and that is made by groundwater. Unasserted cores and fine debris that are left by melting glaciers. So glaciers forming glacial till, that's the land formed by glaciers. And last is natural submerged ridges that are covered by sand and unconsolidated materials by waves and currents. Sand, should have told you that the answer is offshore sandbars. So these were only few of the landforms. There were many others, but so this is how you can read them. But first you can start by looking into the whole topic. If I understand it's a lot of topic there, it can get overwhelming for you. So first start by partitioning the entire lecture into subparts. Pick up one part for the day, try to understand what it is saying. And more often than not in geography, if you have a visual representation, it becomes easier for you to understand that. So that's why I try to put a lot of images. You can also do that at your end, try to get images and look into the images just when you are reading, so that builds a picture in your mind and you are able to retain it much better. Right, with that, today's problem solving session comes to an end, and I've given my mail ID here. If any one of you have any doubt regarding all these 3 sessions, you can mail me and ask me questions, or you can also put it in the forum that we have for in the NPTEL Conservation Geography groups, Google group. So you can try putting your questions there. We will try to also come up with solution there. You can mail me for any further doubts. And with that, uh, today's session is towards an end. If you have any doubt or any help that you need for this lecture or for anything regarding this course, you can ask me. If not, we will meet in the next session, which is next Tuesday. Thank you so much. See you next Tuesday. Happy reading. Bye bye. Thank you.